Tonight, who will score points? Who will convince you? Who will reassure you? Who will inspire you? Welcome to the Federal Leaders Debate 2025.
The word tariff is one of the most beautiful words in the dictionary.
This election is the most important of our lives. We will never be an American state, ever. The U.S. threat is huge, but there are other issues at stake. We choose Quebec. Donald Trump has attacked our country. We have to defend our workers. Live from Maison Radio-Canada in Montreal, this is the Leaders Debate 2025 with Patrice Roy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the French Leaders Debate. We are joined by Mark Carney, leader of the Liberal Party, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, Yves-François Blanchet, leader of the Bloc Québécois, and Jagmeet Singh, leader of the New Democratic Party. Good evening to all four of you.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 p.m. in a few seconds? This important event has been moved forward to give as many people as possible the opportunity to tune in without missing a decisive moment for another one of our passions, hockey. And by the way, I'll go off script here for a few seconds and say that the Montreal Canadiens, you'd better win. I also would like to say that the leaders' invitations were managed by the Leaders' Debates Commission, and the podium places on the set were designated at random. But the questions, subjects, and editorial choices are ours. I'll be managing speaking time fairly, within a fair limit. There are 5 themes tonight. Obviously, the trade war with the United States, the cost of living, energy and climate, immigration and foreign affairs, and finally, identity and sovereignty. And I'll also have a few rapid-fire questions at the end of the debate. This debate is your debate this evening. You will be free to speak as much as possible. The only rule that I ask of you is not to speak at the same time. If you start talking over one another, I'll ask Pascal, our sound engineer, to turn off your mics. So let the debate begin, or I was going to say good game. So we'll move on to our first opening question. You'll have 45 seconds each to answer. This election, according to many, has been hijacked by Trump. So to assert our sovereignty early in this debate, I'll ask you to name 2 things you'd put forward, concrete things that will change the lives of Canadians, but that have nothing to do with the United States. 45 seconds. Mr. Carney, you're first.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Leroy. And I'd like to thank everyone watching at home for joining us tonight. And I'd like to thank the other leaders for your service to Canada. 2 things that don't include Mr. Trump. First of all, we need to double the rhythm of construction of new homes here in Canada. That's absolutely fundamental. And the second thing, we need to promote and strengthen our cultural institutions in Canada.
45 seconds, Mr. Poilievre. 2 things that you would promise Canadians to change their lives that have nothing to do with the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Roy, and thanks to my colleagues for being here today. Clearly, life is no longer affordable. The promise of an affordable life is broken. I have a plan to make life more affordable by cutting taxes by 15%. That's one thing that will reward work for the middle class and for seniors who've already worked. Second thing, we're going to scrap the GST on new houses. We're going to incentivize cities to reduce their taxes too, so that our young people can save up to $100,000 on a new home and restore the promise of Canada.
Mr. Blanchet.
I would like to come back to something that I do all year long. First of all, thank you for having welcomed us. I have been waiting for this moment for a long time. I would like to insist on two things for Quebec that I was talking about before the Trump crisis is Quebec's right to have a different and open economy, open to the world, based on its own natural resources, on its own attachment to a green economy, but also Quebec's right to be different, to have a different language, to have a different culture, to have different values, to have different immigration models that need to succeed. These are elements that should always have been mentioned, but that have a particularly new sense with this new crisis.
Great. Mr. Singh, 45 seconds. Two things that have nothing to do with the American.
Thank you for the question. Good evening, everybody. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about values. What are the values that underpin the answer to this question? Canadians and Quebecers like taking care of one another. We come together. That is what we believe in. That is a basic value for us. And this value is embodied in our public health care system, which has nothing to do with the U.S. And we want our healthcare system to be nothing like the American one. We will expand pharmacare so that everyone can access the medications they need. And I also want to talk about dental care. I also want to expand that program, which owes itself to us.
Thank you. I'd like to reassure you, Mr. Singh. I think you were disappointed. We are going to talk about health as well, and I'll ask questions about that later. First theme, therefore, obviously, the trade war. Trump is going to be tough. We don't know what's in store with him. I don't think any solution is going to be possible. We always thought they were our ally. It doesn't make sense. You can't reason with him. The government will have to stand firm, stay firm. We have to put him in his place. Otherwise, he'll destroy us totally. The answer should be pragmatic. It would be good to pause some of our services to the U.S. They need us. An eye for an eye, no messing around. Get us out of this mess. We need a leader who can make decisions to destabilize Trump and make him respect Canada. What does he plan to do with the new president of the United States? What do you plan to do with this president? That is the elephant in the room. So for your information, there are 1,073 days left in Donald Trump's term. Why do you think that you are the best person here tonight to negotiate with Mr. Trump? Mr. Poilievre, 35 seconds.
First of all, we will never be an American state. We will remain sovereign. On my first day as Prime Minister, I will restart negotiations to accelerate a deal that will put an end to the tariffs and protect our sovereignty. We can't control Trump, but at the same time, we have to control what we can control. We need to reverse liberal economic policies that have weakened our country. We need to unleash our resources, cut taxes, and bring jobs back home so that we can face Trump from a position of strength.
All right, well, first of all, in a crisis, you have to plan for the worst possible situation, and you have to have a plan to build a strong economy here in Canada. And we need to react with strength, and those are the elements that will allow us to succeed with Mr. Trump. He respects strength. He respects people who understand how the world works and who understand how the private sector works. And Canada needs to create other options, new, reliable partnerships around the world, and that's what I'll do.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Mr. Blanchet.
Mr. Trump will hang from his own noose because their economy is dependent on ours. But there will be a lot of harm done to Canada, to Europe, to Mexico before then. We have to realize that our joint GDP is bigger than the States. Our population is bigger than the States, and so retaliation is going to hurt the States, but we have to negotiate in a rational way, and we shouldn't fall to fear, and we shouldn't spin fear for political reasons.
Conclusions?
It's all about priorities. For me, now is the time to invest, not cut. It is the time to protect what we hold dear, our farmers, our culture, the French language. These things should not be sacrificed. It is time to defend who we are, what our values are. And we believe in helping one another. That's what we will do. How? We will strengthen our healthcare system. We will not let it be Americanized. That is crucial. We must defend who we are.
So, open debate to begin now for about 15 minutes. Mr. Poilievre, you have called Carney a political grifter, a globalist banker who's disconnected from reality. And Mr. Carney, you've said Pierre Poilievre is a career politician who knows nothing about how the real world works. So I ask you the question, which of you first is capable of standing up to Donald Trump? Mr. Poilievre.
I am, because I'm going to put Canada first. I will never compromise Canada's interests, and I will control what we can control here. Obviously, no one will be able to control the decisions of Donald Trump, but we can control our economy, our domestic economy, by overturning liberal economic policies that have weakened our country and made us more dependent on the Americans.
The issue is, Mr. Poilievre,
Well,
you would make Canada more like the
That's not
United
true.
States. You would Americanize our healthcare system,
That's not true.
privatize it. Everyone knows that's what conservatives do.
That's not true.
Mr. Carney, you said that you're better?
all right. First of all, I know how to negotiate. And I agree with Mr. Singh. We need to start by saying what's never going to be on the table. The French language, Quebec's culture, and supply management will never be on the table. Our resources, that's the first thing. Second, in terms of Mr. Blanchet's point, the opportunities that we have with the European Union are there, and I've already started building new relationships with the European Union. As Prime Minister, I met with the President of France and with the President of the European Commission.
There's a lot to unpack in there, let's be honest. And perhaps it's right. You say that you're an expert in managing a crisis, but you say you're a negotiator, but, well, perhaps negotiating with tax havens. But when it comes to trade agreements, I haven't seen the proof. We apparently have to believe you with no political experience. And so I find this kind of funny because people say we have to unite and work together. On the one hand, you have never spoken to me before this evening. You're not trying to figure out how to collaborate between equals, Quebec, Canada, Mexico, European partners. You're trying to score divisive points that only serves the United States of America.
All right. I've just started as Prime Minister. I've been Prime Minister for a month. In the first week, I signed an agreement with the premiers of all the provinces, the Premier of Quebec and the premiers of all the provinces and territories concerning free trade within Canada. It's also an agreement that deals with trade corridors. That's an example. That's an example.
You haven't sat with any premiers. You've sat with MPs that will be elected at the same level as you if you're elected.
The problem, Mr. Carney, is that your party has been in power for 10 years. And in that time, it's not meetings that are going to change things. It's your policies that have blocked resources. C-69, which blocks not just pipelines, but also dams, mines, and liquid natural gas exploration. We have a deal with Europe, a trade deal. The Conservatives negotiated it, but liberal legislation has prevented development, and you continue to support those laws. Those laws need to be repealed and replaced with laws that will unleash our resources and allow us to export abroad and allow us to become truly economically and
talk about that later.
Sovereign and
In a war,
have
you need
energy
to determine
sovereignty
your
as well.
priorities. Mr. Carney, unfortunately, your priority is, well, you had time to meet with the king, but you did not increase the amount of money people receive when they lose their jobs due to the trade war. These days, people receiving EI get maybe half of their salary. For people who have already lost their jobs, that is not enough. It won't cover the bills. It won't cover their rent costs. That shows your priorities. For me, workers are number one. We need a system to support our workers.
We'll hear some in a few seconds, but Mr. Carney, response, and then I have another question for Blanchet.
Well, first of all, we need to fight in a trade war. We need to fight with counter tariffs. And all the money collected from our counter tariffs will go directly to workers and the businesses that are the most affected by this trade war. They won't be used for tax cuts the way that Mr. Poilievre is going to do.
You always want to increase them. You're liberal. We want to cut taxes.
Started as Prime Minister
For a fourth Liberal term.
I've just started.
You were Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. Have you forgotten that?
Honestly, let me cut in here. Both of them would cut taxes for billionaires and millionaires. They have already done it in the past. Your first step was to reduce taxes for the millionaires. Pierre Poilievre would do the same thing.
That's not
You're
true.
not thinking of regular people.
We've cut the consumer carbon
Great.
tax. That's what we
Mr. Singh,
did.
Mr. Blanchet, we've been telling Canadians for several days that it would be better to have a minority government. You said it clearly. With Trump, can Canadians not want a majority government that's stronger?
I don't know where that reasoning comes. The minority government would be weaker than a majority government. Go tell that to the Germans, who have only governed through coalitions recently. Many countries have coalitions, and if that is the population of the people, then great. At this point, it's possible that Canadians and Quebecers, perhaps, choose to trust in someone who has the least experience in politics. Quebec has a different economy, different interests, different everything. We want a parliament where our economic difference is taken into account.
Let's talk a little bit about
Mr. Singh,
minority
in terms of the minority
governments.
government,
The whole point of a minority government is to help people, to make a difference in people's lives. But honestly, Mr. Blanchet, unfortunately, in the last minority government, you showed that you were as useless as the monarchy is. You did nothing for people. What is worse, you voted against measures that would help Quebecers. Dental care, pharmacare. These are measures that have helped hundreds of thousands of Quebecers.
Quebec jurisdiction, dental care, health care,
People in Quebec,
pharmacare,
People
money
in
that we
Quebec-
send to Ottawa. Ottawa does not have the expertise or the jurisdiction.
we are
Quebec
paying their
does.
bills.
Mr. Roy,
Please let me finish one sentence.
please wrap it up.
When we want to be effective, we give the money to the experts, those who have the legal jurisdiction to spend the money, and that is Quebec in this case. The NDP gave $2 billion to
We
a
are
insurance company.
Giving
Everything was
money to our
going
Quebec seniors.
fine until now, but Mr. Carney, in terms of the minority government,
Mr. Roy, we are in a crisis, the most serious crisis of our lives. We need to react with resounding, overwhelming strength. Yes, we need to cut a few taxes. Yes, we need to cut bureaucracy. But the government needs to act in a time of crisis. So we need to have a government ready to act.
But when you were Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, you weakened our economy. We need economic sovereignty, and that means bringing back production to Canada. And I would reverse Liberal policies around development. I would expedite construction permits. We would have pre-approved permits. And that I would also make sure that we could send our energy to Europe to break Europeans' dependence on Putin, and to break our dependence on the U.S.
The Conservatives and the Liberals both prioritize the ultra-rich, not you, not
Great,
regular
we do
Canadians.
have a segment on that.
That's the difference.
We have a segment on energy and pipelines, so we'll come back to that later. There are people who are watching us who are concerned. There will be negotiations with the Americans, obviously. Well, you'll all say supply management here, but I'd like to say that Canada gave up market shares during the last 3 trade deal negotiations. We're talking about more than $450 million a year in losses for Canadian farmers. So what is something you wouldn't concede in a negotiation?
I will defend supply management. I will defend the French language. I will defend our healthcare system. I will defend our decisions and our laws. We will always be sovereign. And the way we're going to restore that sovereignty, Canadian sovereignty, is by making our economy stronger. We need to cut red tape by 25% for businesses. We need to reduce development charges, taxes on housing. We need to support labor and energy and domestic production. That's how we can be more sovereign
management. Well, go around the table, Mr. Carney.
In the face of the U.S.
It's nice to say supply management, but we've said it 3 times and it hasn't been done. So,
well, this is the first time that I will be at the table if I am elected as Prime Minister. I've said a number of times, and since the beginning of my campaign in Mauricie, we'll never touch supply management. We won't put Quebec culture or the French language on the table. And I think we all agree on that point. And that's important. We have to be very clear from the beginning when talking to the Americans.
One area that we don't agree on is that Pierre Poilievre would cut our healthcare system. You said it, everyone knows it. You said that you want to cut. You would cut dental care.
Not true.
Pharmacare. You called them bad ideas. And unfortunately, Mr. Carney's plan to budget the operating budget in 3 years would lead to $43 billion worth of cuts.
We'll talk about that in the next segment. Cost of living, we'll talk about tax cuts later and choices, and we will underscore that none of you has tabled a costed plan. These are just promises. Mr. Blanchet on supply management.
We have tabled a program, first of all. Second of all, we are not the ones who decide what's on the table. If Mr. Trump says, I want to talk about this, no one will be able to stop him from at least talking about it. We've never sacrificed the principle of supply management. So it's empty words. Little bits have been sacrificed every single time at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars every single time. All Mr. Trump wants is a wave of Wisconsin milk with hormones, with no protection against antibiotics.
So what would you do concretely?
We will bring back an act that everyone approved. The Liberals before Carney approved it. Everyone had approved it, but then there were certain intrigues with unelected senators. There's a number of unelected members of Parliament that seem to be making decisions.
What would protect better?
Well, maybe I agree with that law, but my point is that we need to invest in Canada. Our plan, which will be unveiled this weekend, will catalyze $500 billion of investment in Canada over the next 5 years. And that will be important in our negotiations with Mr. Trump.
I'd like us to listen to a worker together from Stellantis. For him, this crisis with the U.S. is very clear. He's just lost his job.
I was laid off by Stellantis because of the trade war with the U.S. How will your government stop Mr. Trump from attacking our industries one by one? And how will you protect our jobs? Concrete measures. How will you help workers? You all have different proposals. Mr. Poilievre.
First of all, I already announced a fund to help companies keep jobs, to keep workers in their jobs, because the priority of workers is to keep working. Secondly, there will be EI to protect people who have fallen on rough times. I will be there for people who've lost their jobs. At the same time, we need to stimulate investment to strengthen our economy and to encourage new companies. We need to unleash our natural resources, and we need to create more jobs in resource industries. We also want to create more jobs for tradespeople at a time when they need work to build new houses.
Let's stay on workers. Mr. Singh.
If a business wants to sell cars in Canada, they should be required to have a factory in Canada, a presence in Canada, and I would put this in a law. We are a major market. If you want to sell here, you should create jobs here. And let me add, the first thing Mr. Poilievre said in 2022 when he became Conservative leader is that he would cut EI contributions. So it is not credible that he would increase support to people when he talked about eliminating contributions.
Mr. Blanchet, for workers, you've said you want to go back to a pandemic-style wage subsidy.
The principle of that. We said that even before the campaign. To paraphrase Mr. Poilievre, EI is fairly broken. People have difficulty accessing it, and I disagree with Mr. Carney's suggestion to say that money will be invested in training. You've lost your job, but we're going to train you, and you're going to have another kick at a can at the age of 55. Not a good idea. The idea of the wage subsidy was to allow the worker to have a link to their job by giving them a subsidy so that the employer, should they want to, could rehire them someone who had the skill to do the job. So there would be a transitional period where there could be temporary job losses, like for the case we've just heard.
Well, first of all, three things. All the money from our counter tariffs will go directly to workers. Second, we have a strategic fund for manufacturing in Canada, specifically for the auto sector. And third, our counter tariff system for the automotive sector contains an incentive of $7 billion for the automakers to keep production and workers here in Canada. That's very important. But the reason that we've done all of this is so that we can have strong positions to negotiate with Trump.
Just to conclude, I think we need to encourage Canadians to buy Canadian-made cars. And that's why, as long as there are tariffs, we will scrap the GST on cars and trucks that are built here, mainly built here in Canada.
That's good, because my next...
I think the tariff is a good idea. What allows companies to buy and sell more, then yes, I do agree with that approach.
70%.
Mr. Poilievre copied our idea. We announced the GST lifting for Canadian-made cars before him.
Now, there are a lot of things that are in all of your platforms, but we'll come back to that. Now, 70% of Canadians say that they're buying fewer American products. It's a big number. You leaders, could you please name me one made-in-USA product that you no longer buy?
I buy my own strawberries.
So you don't buy strawberries anymore?
I buy Quebec strawberries, and I do my own shopping, by the way.
What products have you not bought, Mr. Carney?
No more wine, no more alcohol, no more American alcohol.
I do my own shopping, and I cook at home. Lots of products. Fruits, there's a lot of Canadian apples.
So you're making an effort?
Yes, I'm making an effort with apples, other fruit, strawberries.
Strawberries. Everyone is eating a lot of strawberries these days.
I bring it up because I do my own grocery shopping, which Carney does not.
This is a delicious conversation. It's beef in my case. I buy Canadian beef. It's the best beef in the world. But I never buy American strawberries either.
Organic beef from Quebec
Next
is also
theme.
not bad.
Well, let's share some of that
All
someday.
right. It's very beautiful to see. Our next theme is the cost of living. He can manage our money. Oh, we're having a hard time here. I hope they'll be able to balance the budget and maintain the same quality of services. Inflation, lower taxes. I earn a good salary, but it's hard to pay for groceries, for childcare for our kid, for everything. Education is expensive. Prices keep going up. The middle class is hurting, and for the poor, it's worse. We're retired, and we're counting every penny. We're getting poorer. I feel like no one really listens to young people on housing or the cost of living. So what does the future hold for us young people? What does the future hold for young people? I'll give you a few figures here very briefly. I'm sure this won't come as a surprise, but in Montreal, housing prices have more than doubled over 10 years, from over $300,000 to $671,000. Remarkable growth in Toronto and Vancouver as well. So my question, and you'll have 35 seconds, first of all, how can we improve access to housing, for example, for this young woman that we just heard from, Mr. Blanchet?
Clearly, it's through the starting capital and another GST-based policy. There needs to be access to capital for their down payment. My children can't pay for a house. A lot of them have jobs, good jobs. It's essential that we give them a little boost. Using public money, for example, and it's not during a crisis and that in cutting budgets that we will be able to do so. We need to reduce speculation on house prices. We need to invest in affordable housing, social housing, student housing to give a good price and reduce pressure
Thank you, Mr.
in
Blanchet.
the
Mr.
residencies of
35
Canada.
seconds.
I'm with you, with all those who are having a hard time affording their groceries, or young people who can't buy a house. After a decade of liberal inflation, liberal policies have increased the cost of living the most in 40 years. I will cut your taxes for the average worker by 15%. We will scrap the GST on new homes, and we will incentivize municipalities to speed up permits and construction so that young people can once again buy a home and restore the dream of home ownership.
In order to fix this crisis in the cost of living, we need to make sure that Canadians have more money in their pockets, and they need to have more Canada in their pockets. So that means a tax cut for the middle class, and our plan is almost $800 per family, cut the GST on first homes, and increase competition. And in Canada, we have dental care, pharmacare, and daycares. We need to protect that, and we need to double new housing construction in Canada with our plan.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you. When I talk to people and the cost of living comes up, there are two main topics. First, grocery costs. Second, housing costs. For groceries, major grocery giants are gouging us. We saw this with the price of bread, the price of meat. They drive prices up, and they are gouging the Canadian public. We would put price caps on essential groceries. We would also stop corporate landlords from buying up affordable housing and apartments. We are in it for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Singh. 245,000 housing units were built in 2024. You've all promised to massively accelerate the pace of that construction. The Liberals have said 500,000, the NDP 600,000. Mr. Singh, you're going to start this part of the open debate. Do houses grow on trees?
We have a clear plan for how to make this happen. First, we would not sell off our federal land. We would keep it, and we would build affordable housing on it, 100% affordable. We would train Canadian workers to build more homes. We also must keep the affordable housing that we do have, and unfortunately, the two major parties have let rich speculators buy up affordable housing. And now we have no more. That's a major issue. We need to keep our affordable housing and build more housing in general.
A couple of ideas. First of all, I'd like to talk for Quebec. There are delays of hundreds of thousands of houses to be built, and we don't have the human resources to do so. But there are initiatives for small housing, for social housing, modular housing, that would allow us to build quicker with fewer resources and cheaper to accommodate as many people as possible. But I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's financial framework, because the Conservatives want to cut. They're going to have to cut spending at some point as well. The Liberals want to cut in revenue but increase expenditure. There's some financial magic that's in there somewhere. I would like to hear their financial framework or even their electoral platforms.
In a minute,
that would be
the
nice.
Constant Plan. But Mr. Carney, 500,000 housing units.
And we need to get started so that we can get the housing market working better with a reduction in bureaucracy at the municipal level and in fees. But we are proposing a new institution, Build Canada Homes, which is going to build affordable homes using lumber from Quebec, using lumber from British Columbia, using Canadian wood, and using new Canadian technologies. We are going to create a new industry.
How can you say 500,000 units? I mean, I could say 800,000, 400,000. Where's this coming from?
You know, if I can have 35 seconds, we need to add funding of $25 billion for the development of affordable homes and $10 billion for...
Mr. Poilievre, you haven't costed your objective.
Yes, we will, in our platform, which is going to come out in a few days. But, Mr. Carney, you're repeating exactly the same promises that Justin Trudeau has been making for 10 years. During the Liberal decade, when you were the economic advisor, the cost of housing has gone up.
England,
and you inflated the cost of housing then, too. You have a terrible record in England for real estate costs there, the real estate prices. The problem is that the Liberals want to build bureaucracy. They want to balloon bureaucracy by creating new departments, new bureaucrats. We don't need more bureaucrats. We need more homes, more new doors on new homes for young families. The reason why housing has become so expensive today is because of taxes and bureaucracy. I will eliminate the GST on new homes. I will incentivize cities to free up land and accelerate permits so that we can build your home.
Mr. Singh, then Mr. Carney.
Let us talk records. Mr. Poilievre, you were a housing minister. How many homes did you build?
Over 200,000.
I'll tell you, 6. You built 6 homes.
200,000.
6.
200,000.
We cannot believe what
you
you're
asked
saying.
a question. Can I answer it?
We cannot believe Mr. Poilievre. He only built 6 homes
200,000
when he was in power.
Can I answer?
We know the answer.
Can
it's
I
6.
answer? It was 200,000 that year, and the cost of the average home was $450,000. So thanks very much for reminding everyone of my record. It was a good record.
During the 10 years the Conservatives were in power, rent doubled, housing costs doubled. And then, when the Liberals came in, they doubled again. Unfortunately, Mr. Carney benefited from the housing crisis when he was the board chair at Brookfield Investments. His company benefited from the housing crisis by buying up affordable buildings and tripling rents.
Mr. Carney.
Okay, Mr. Poilievre's approach is everyone for themselves. In the COVID crisis, he said, okay, let's cut taxes, let's cut bureaucracy. This crisis, now that we're facing the greatest crisis of our lives, he's saying, cut taxes, cut bureaucracy. In a crisis, you have to do that to a certain point, but you have to act as a government. And if I may, you need to have capital to catalyze investment. And with a small amount of catalyzing investment from the Government of Canada, we can create huge private investment and a new Canadian industry.
All right, Mr. Blanchet, then Mr. Poilievre.
Another proposal that I find interesting is to allow parents who have money in savings for their retirement to take the money temporarily to help for their kids' down payment. That's not $500 billion that will be required. These are not civil servants that will be fired. This is a logical decision made by parents like myself who want to help their kids without money from the state, with a tax measure that helps retirees who want to help their children. Would that not be more concrete than programs after programs that are just empty words and for which there's no financial framework?
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a minute, but let's let Mr. Poilievre conclude because you were having a conversation with Mr. Carney.
Mr. Carney, in 2020 and 2021, you said that inflation wouldn't happen and that it would have been a good thing if it did. You were quoted in the media, and you even advised Justin Trudeau to print money, and that's what caused our inflationary crisis. You're just like Justin Trudeau. You have exactly the same policies, the same approach. We need change. And you, Mr. Carney, you do not embody change.
You represent the ultra-rich.
Mr. Poilievre is not Justin Trudeau. I'm not Justin Trudeau either, okay? In this election, the question is, who is going to succeed? Who is going to face Mr. Trump?
Same parties, same ministers, same caucus, same ideology, same hostility against Quebec. It's not just because the leader changes that the philosophy will magically change overnight.
You are all proposing, or just about all of you are proposing tax cuts. We'll see them up on the screen here. Mr. Carney announced that on the first day of the campaign. Mr. Poilievre's been announcing them for a long time. So for a couple earning $90,000 a year, you can see the numbers up here: $1,299 in savings for the Conservatives, $1,011 for the NDP, $577 for the Liberals. And the cost of those measures is really what I want to underline here. Mr. Poilievre, you're spending more on tax cuts than the NDP or Liberals. Now, you've all arrived here this evening with no costed financial plan. It's been a long time since we've seen that at the time of the leaders' debate, the leaders don't have a costed plan. So we don't know how you're going to pay for these tax cuts. Now, I'm going to be careful how I word this, but don't you think it's irresponsible to Canadian voters to do this? Mr. Carney, you said you've got the numbers, but where's your costed plan?
As I've just said, we'll be presenting our costed platform this weekend.
But why not earlier at an event?
There are 10 days left in the election campaign. It's about the same thing as Mr. Poilievre, as I've seen. And it is going to be costed, and the operational budget will be cleaned up. We'll balance it in 3 years, but at the same time, we will be investing in Canada and in Canadians.
Mr. Poilievre, where would you make the cuts? This comes back to my earlier question to Mr. Carney. In terms of the costed plans, what do you have to hide? Will transfers to provinces go down, for example?
We're going to cut consultants. Believe it or not, a Canadian family is spending $1,400 in federal tax just to pay for consultants. That's been a 100% increase. I'm going to cut consultants. Secondly, we're going to cut the cost of bureaucracy through attrition. People will be retiring, and we don't need to replace all of them. We can slowly, gradually reduce the cost of the bureaucracy. Third, we're going to pass a dollar-for-dollar bill. For every new dollar in spending, there will have to be a dollar in reduced spending. And we are going to generate $70 billion
But again,
more in
you
revenues.
and Mr. Carney don't have a costed plan that we've seen.
We are the only party that has talked about ways to increase government revenues. We have talked about closing tax loopholes, getting rid of tax havens, empowering the CRA to go after corporations that are not paying their taxes. These are not tax increases. These are taxes that are already supposed to be paid. The CRA has said that tens of billions of dollars in revenues are being lost. Pierre Poilievre has been very honest with Canadians. He will cut healthcare.
Not true. No,
he will
not true.
cut
That's false.
EI. He said
That's
this back in
false.
2022 when he became leader of the Conservative
true.
Party.
That's false.
And Mark Carney has also said very clearly that he would make massive cuts.
No.
He would cut $43 billion worth
For
of
the first
spending.
time.
Mr. Carney, then Mr. Blanchet.
No, that's not right at all. I've said there is an operational budget that's over $200 billion a year. And that budget has grown 9% year over year over the last 10 years. We need to slow down that growth. And we'll do that with technology, we'll do that with attrition, as Mr. Poilievre has suggested, and we can do that, and we will do that, and it's necessary, but we're not going to cut transfers to individuals, nor transfers to the provinces.
So the provinces will not get less money. Mr. Blanchet, is that what you believe?
Well, I've an issue with this. These are Harry Potter financial frameworks. You need a lot of magic to make it work. There needs to be more money, but we're going to do cuts. They want to be more conservative than the Conservatives. Basic economics state that when there's a threat of recession or slowdown, that is when the state, well, that's why we're not saying cut taxes. We're saying make good investments. We want to invest in our military forces. It's the time to do so with Canadian companies, the Quebec Tramway that Mr. Poilievre doesn't want to do. That's what we have to do. We have to have targeted investments, health transfers so that the Maisonneuve-Rosemont Hospital can be renovated. It's time to invest in infrastructure, public infrastructure with public money so that everyone can keep their jobs.
So no tax cuts.
No, it wouldn't be a tax cut. There would be a specific budget for it.
It's necessary.
We have to keep going. They want to do one thing and the other. Cut, but somehow make more money. Something doesn't work.
We've started with the cost of living. We have to cut taxes for the cost of living.
What Mr. Blanchet said is true. You are talking about a magic spell here, Mr. Carney. This is one rare moment where we agree. On February 16th, you sat down with Rosemary Barton and you said that you would cut spending in
Yes,
the operating budget.
operational spending. That's different.
You said
One at a time, please.
that this would affect transfers for healthcare and to individuals.
Mr. Roy, no.
I have a question.
That's not right at all. That's not right at all.
Please, Mr. Carney, you'll have the opportunity to answer later. The question that people are asking themselves, and you may have heard this, Mr. Singh, you've promised that every Canadian will have a family doctor, that there will be vastly more nurses. Does the federal government need to continue developing more national plans like pharmacare and dental care? Or, option two, should they be giving more money to the provinces for health care? Mr. Carney, you'll start off. More programs or more money
First
for
of all,
programs?
the priority for the federal government is to invest and to catalyze investment in the most serious crisis we're facing in our lives. We need to catalyze private investment in our economy to create new and good jobs. That's the first thing we need to do. In terms of transfers to provinces for healthcare, yes, there are limits to the federal government's activity. No new programs. No.
Mr. Blanchet?
It's easy. All premiers from the provinces and territories unanimously asked for a 35% health transfer. I would like to re-explain it. The federal government receives more money than it needs. It needs $10, it gets $12. Quebec needs $10, but it only gets $8. So the federal government could take its surplus and say, I would like to invest in your jurisdictions. The Liberals and the Conservatives agree on this, and the NDP loves butting its nose into provincial jurisdiction. The Constitution sets out jurisdictions. The easiest way is to give the money without conditions.
You've said that we do need to step in, that we need to have more programs like this.
Let me explain. Absolutely, we need to increase health transfers, absolutely, in order to help out the provinces. What is more, we are now in the midst of a crisis, a healthcare crisis. It is being felt here in Quebec and all throughout the country. We should recognize that a leader is someone who looks for solutions, not excuses. I believe that we should be investing more in fixing problems. And yes, we can work with the provinces to hire more healthcare workers. We can work with them to get through this crisis. Pharmacare is one area where everyone can come together to bring down the cost of medication. We believe in helping people.
Deciding Quebec's priorities isn't your jurisdiction. I don't go to your house and tell you how to paint your wall, do I? It's money that you would refuse to give Quebec.
We can do two things at once. We can transfer money and then work with the provinces on other solutions.
Mr. Poilievre, more money to the provinces or more federal programs?
I think the federal government is taking too much tax revenues and delivering too little. And that's the Liberal track record after 10 years. And the question for Canadians is, you can't afford your groceries and you can't afford your rent or your housing because it's too expensive now after 3 terms of Liberal government. Will a 4th Liberal term change things for you, enough for you to be able to buy a house and have a beautiful life?
Okay. For the health program, I didn't understand.
On healthcare, no. What I propose on that is a program that the federal government could coordinate, and that is to do with licenses for doctors and nurses. It would be a voluntary program, as has previously existed, to allow immigrants to be licensed and be able to work in our hospitals to reduce your wait times.
So everyone agrees on health transfer. The question is, the 13 premiers of the 13 economies of Canada. Canada doesn't have one economy, it has 13 economies. These requests were made to stop the deterioration of the healthcare system.
Next theme. Energy and climate.
The carbon tax was something that was supposed to help the environment, but now, what are we doing for the environment? It worries me a bit. Our planet is starting to die. I really want to see someone who can prioritize climate change and the economy in Canada. We shouldn't be building a pipeline. The environmental consequences are very serious, even if for ecological reasons it's not the best solution. Well, I think we have to think about it. There was a good project in place, but then it was dropped. A pipeline would have a major impact. We may have to make sacrifices if we want to be more independent. Drill, baby, drill, says Donald Trump. But I have a very simple question for you, and I would like just a simple answer as well. You have 35 seconds open debate. Do you want Canada to increase oil production? Yes or no? Mr. Singh.
I would be in favor of investing in clean energy, renewable energy. With our public money, I would spend on projects like an east-west clean energy grid. That's the sort of thing we need. We need renewable energy for our future. That is where we should invest our public funds.
So, more or less oil, or the same amount as right now? You want to increase it? That's what people want to know. Are you increasing oil production?
There are a few measures that I support. Investing in clean energy. Bringing down our emissions.
We'll get to that in the open debate later. But the question is very simple, I think. Mr. Carney.
Yes, more oil so that we can reduce our imports, especially our imports from the United States, a country that is threatening us right now. But in order to do that, we need to have low-risk oil. Canada is a low-risk country, and low-cost oil. Canada's more or less that right now, but we also need low-carbon oil because we need to be competitive over the long term. So at the same time, we need to have pipelines. We need to invest in carbon stockage, carbon capture as well. That's very important for our competitiveness.
We'll get to that later. Mr. Poilievre, should we produce more oil in Canada?
Yes. And we have to be able to get it to market by pipeline. Unfortunately, the other parties passed an unconstitutional law, C-69, which is a no more pipelines bill, and that's why Canadians and Quebecers now have to buy 139,000 barrels of U.S. oil every day. I will repeal C-69 to allow for the construction of hydroelectric projects, mines, and also pipelines so that we can get around Donald Trump and be sovereign when it comes to energy.
There's a competition as to who will be the biggest oil head here. The Americans buy our oil, we buy their oil, because that's how geography works. I want less oil, but let us be clear. The one that approved 9B for Enbridge was me when I was the Environment Minister, but I say that we have to progressively wean off of petrol and oil because the cost on families will be far worse than what Mr. Poilievre says. Paying for the consequences of climate change will cost billions of dollars every single year per family. Let us invest in Quebec's green energy.
I'd like to ask a question to launch the debate. Mr. Carney, for 17 years now, the Liberals have been telling us that the only way to fight against climate change is to put a price on carbon. With the carbon tax, there was elections on this. But the first day you came to power, you abolished this tax. What should Canadians understand from this? Is the fight against climate change no longer a priority for Liberals?
Not at all. It is still a priority, and it's a priority for Canada. We're talking a lot about diversifying our trade partners around the world. The European Union. We need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in manufacturing and energy in all of our products so that we can have better access to that market. But in terms of the carbon tax, we cut the consumer carbon tax. And that covers about 6% of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We are maintaining the industrial carbon tax for big polluters, but we're creating a new market so that major polluters will pay people and households to make green decisions.
You would axe the second carbon tax as well, the industrial tax? You would eliminate both?
Yes.
Eliminate both? So there's not even a fight against climate change or no incentive except
That's not true.
less gas.
There's a cost associated with using energy already, but my approach is a pragmatic one. For example, the National Bank calculated that if we export our natural gas, our liquefied natural gas, to India, for example, to replace coal, that could reduce emissions in India by 2.5 billion tons. That's 3 times the emissions of all of Canada, and would also bring a lot of money back to Canada. The Liberals are blocking the construction of the pipeline and of the LNG plants. For example, LNG Quebec is a project that would make it possible for us to sell our energy very profitably to Europe and reduce Europe's dependence on Putin. And that's what I would like to do instead of feeding into Putin's war machine.
Mr. Carney's abolition of the carbon tax means that Canadians outside of Quebec will receive a rebate for several weeks still for a tax that has been cut. So this puts Quebec in an unjust position. What are you asking in this respect?
Another element, it might give Mr. Carney's an opportunity to answer. Last year, Canada invested $30 billion in oil. Trans Mountain cost $40 billion. It took 9 years to build it. That means that with only just these elements, that's $16 billion of Quebec money that was invested in oil. Do you want a great energy worksite? It's Quebec's green worksite. So let's invest there. With regards to the $3.7 billion, the government would preemptively reimburse the tax carbon. Now the carbon tax. Now they've cancelled the carbon tax before the elections, but they're still sending reimbursements for expenditures that people won't have to do because the carbon tax no longer exists. Quebec is responsible and still has a cap and trade system like California. We're being penalized. We're taking $800 million out of Quebecers' pockets. That's $100 per person, including newborn babies, $800 from everyone's pockets, $100 from everyone's pockets to offer electoral baubles just before an election.
Is there not an injustice there?
It's not an injustice. Quebec is a pioneer in carbon markets, and that's clear. First point. And the second point, Canadians outside of Quebec and British Columbia have paid the carbon tax, and as such, they receive the carbon rebate, and all Canadians, including Quebecers, will receive the middle-class tax cut. Because we have what we've done, there's a principle here. There's an important principle here.
Yes, you're going to speak in a moment. Just in terms of clarity for those who are listening to us, what reimbursement are you talking about?
The rebate. No, not in Quebec. No, not in Quebec.
But,
no, but
Quebec,
there's a principle.
gas prices are higher.
There's a principle here. We are making people whole, people who paid the carbon tax. And we're doing that in a fair way.
Europe, Quebec, and California has a system that incentivizes companies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. It's about 9 cents per litre, and it's much cheaper than the potential effects and the future effects of climate change.
Just to get back to the debate topic, we are talking about the climate crisis here. That is not something that is a long way off. This is something going on right now. We are already in the midst of the climate crisis. We have seen it here in Quebec. Extreme temperatures, forest fires, flooding. I agree with Mr. Blanchet that it is too high a cost to bear, so we need to do something. I spoke with one mother before I became a father, and she said, I'm worried about my children when they play outside. I'm worried about the BC forest fires. Our children cannot breathe the air outside. And now that I am a father, I feel the same anxiety. With forest fires, people cannot breathe the air. So we need to do something. We need to protect our environment, and we need to protect our children.
Mr. Poilievre, you're clear. You're saying that we need a pipeline. If, in spite of all of your efforts with the Indigenous nations, they say no, would you impose it in spite of all of your efforts? If Quebec says no, would you impose it?
Well, first of all, you shouldn't assume that, because most Quebecers want a pipeline. According to the polls, look, there's no social acceptability for the status quo. Thank you very much.
That is the most empty sentence I've ever heard in this debate so far.
Can I answer the question?
That is just, it's nonsense, absolute nonsense.
I'll say what it means. I'll tell you. Quebecers who buy oil from Alberta, it's got to go through the U.S. currently, which gives Donald Trump power over our own energy. You say you're in favor of sovereignty. I'm in favor of economic sovereignty and energy sovereignty, and that requires a pipeline
It's yet another
across Canada.
scarecrow. the US will never bomb their economy so much by sacrificing a hugely profitable product. That's such an amazing argument. How much will your pipeline cost? Trans Mountain cost $40 billion, but now you want a 4,600-kilometer pipeline without investors, with Europe that doesn't even want it in the first place.
Just to clarify, I would never subsidize pipelines. That's unnecessary. They're very profitable. The only reason why it's expensive now is because there are rules and legislation that prevent the construction of pipelines because of bureaucracy. We're going to get rid of red tape. We're going to open this up to
I'll ask my question again.
Protections, cutting environmental regulations.
If Indigenous nations, in spite of all your nice efforts, and talking about Mr. Carney and you who want a pipeline, if they refuse, what do you do?
Refuse? Are you saying across the board?
Yes, we've seen this.
Because
He can't say that. He doesn't get to impose his will.
Mr. Poilievre, if there are Indigenous nations or provinces that are against it, what do you do?
Well, there are others who will be in favor. For example, Mr. Carney opposed a pipeline in the West, which would have enabled us to sell our oil to Asia, the Northern Gateway project. 80% of First Nations were in favor, 20% were against. And in a case like that, I think the majority rules. And I think we need to allow our companies to pay some of their taxes directly to First Nations to fight poverty through industry and production. That's our approach.
Would you be ready to impose one?
No, never impose. Can I respond, please? Never impose, no. But a couple of points. First of all, our relationship with the United States has changed everything. So imports from the United States and geography, as Mr. Poilievre has said, around pipelines, those are problems. Those are national security problems for us, and we need to act. That's the first point. Second, on March 21st, there was a meeting of the premiers. All the premiers were here in Ottawa, and we sat down and we agreed. All the premiers signed an agreement to have an energy corridor that would cover oil, natural gas, clean energy, and critical minerals. And with that, and with a process with Indigenous leaders, we can and we could have a solution to this problem. And that's an example of leadership. That's an example of bringing leaders together to meet a national goal. We need to do more than that over this crisis.
I'll ask the question again. If ever Indigenous nations
No, I've said no.
against
I've said
it,
no.
you forget the project?
Well, no.
You cannot force projects on people.
Listen, it's a question
I have another question about the environment. Here's the question. You have said that you are a pragmatic person. Do you agree that it is not pragmatic to continue to subsidize oil companies with billions of dollars? That's not pragmatic at all. Would you agree?
Well, I agree with that principle.
Okay, then will you commit to stopping these subsidies?
Absolutely. It's clear.
This is why you need New Democrats. Look at that. We got a commitment from Mr. Carney.
New. It's not a new commitment.
This is why you need New
That's
Democrats.
not a new commitment. Let's be very clear.
Mid-February, British Columbia. You, like all other Canadian leaders, said something in English that was, if necessary, you would use the executive emergency powers. You said it. I heard it again yesterday. You would force pipelines through Canada and through Quebec.
No.
After 2 days after that, with Mr. Roy.
That's not it. That's not it at all.
No, please be nice. We're almost friends. But then you said to Monsieur Roy, I would never like to force this. So it's not rules that stop this. It's social acceptability that stopped this pipeline because people said no.
Mr. Carney, please reply.
Okay, no. It's the use of emergency powers for the federal government. That's for federal approval. But there also has to be approval, for example, here in Quebec. There has to be approval from the provinces and the support of Indigenous people. This is Canada. That's how Canada works. But another point, if I may, we're starting to see cooperation agreements come into place with the provinces to have one project, one evaluation, and that's going to accelerate the approval of major projects in Canada.
Right. Mr. Blanchet, you said that I have a greater chance of signing the Canadian Constitution than approving a pipeline. But how could you really paint yourself in such a corner and say never, ever? If our relationship with the U.S. gets worse, the pipeline goes to the United States, if our ports become trickier in terms of imports, what would you do? What would you tie your hands?
Mr. Trump's threat is a very serious one, but he won't self-destruct the American economy. And Americans think that Canadian oil is in their backyard. There's no rule that stops oil from being built or circulating, but Quebecers didn't want it, and Mr. Carney said, I will like to respect Quebec's environmental rules. So there are certain elements that are incoherent from him.
Never. It's a long
still
time.
no, because Quebec is the best placed in the world to develop a green super energy market that goes right to the south without asking Ottawa's permission. Why would we invest in oil that doesn't have economic benefits for Quebec if it means that we still pay more at the pump?
Two quick comments. You are slightly behind in terms of the tramway and the third link. We're talking about the environment and public transit as well. So the third link, would you fund this or the tramway, one or the other, or both?
Yes, for the Quebec City Tramway, we support public transit. We are against projects that are bad for the environment.
So you're against the third link?
Exactly. We are against the third link. We support the tramway. One solution to address the climate crisis, while at the same time helping our economy, is to invest heavily in public transit. This would help municipalities, this would help provinces. We could work together with them and use transfers to provide more funding for these projects, and they're the sort of projects we need. They would create good jobs while, at the same time, helping Canada reduce emissions.
Mr. Poilievre, tramway or a third link, both, or just the third link?
Just the third link. You have to make choices. And I would speak to people in the regions today. The other parties are against the third link, and they want to ban gas-powered cars. That's not practical in the regions of our country. You need a truck, you need a car in order to live in regional areas. So I'm going to reverse that. You'll be able to keep your truck. We will build highways and bridges so that you can live a good life in the
Mr.
regions.
Blanchet, both projects?
The Quebec government wants the tramway. The city of Quebec City, rather, wants the tramway. The federal government needs to give the money required to the provincial government for the tramway. We don't know what a third link looks like. We don't know where it's going to go, under, over. We don't know what color it's going to be.
You are supposed to give your opinion on that for the past three debates.
Please remind me of my past.
Mr. Carney?
Well, I can be quick. Tramway, yes, because there is a project that's underway. We support it. And as Mr. Blanchet has said, there is no project right now for the third link.
But I think the third link will be a blue one.
It'll be blue? Right.
I don't have a lot of time left, but I'll add one more question. Do we have to speed up the development of nuclear power?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And for a couple of reasons.
Across Quebec, in Ontario?
Well, yeah. It's a choice that Quebec and the provinces will make. But we have a major advantage here in Canada. We have uranium. We have big nuclear companies, including Westinghouse, Candu, and others. And we have technology
yes.
in small modular reactors. So it's a great opportunity.
I understand there are worlds in the countries in the world that need nuclear energy. I don't think Canada needs nuclear energy. Quebec doesn't want it. I'm not going to interfere in Canadian energy,
Well,
but
they could be reviewed.
no, Quebecers don't want nuclear energy. I'm also the one that managed the closure of the
Yes.
Gentilly plant.
But we're not going to reopen it.
As a national project, I am in favor of an east-west energy grid that would connect Quebec with Manitoba and
Nuclear power.
BC to transport clean energy. It could. I'm
Perfect.
not so much in favor of nuclear energy. I support renewable and
Poilievre, nuclear
hydro
power.
energy more.
In favor. Yep. That's one of the best sources of electricity. It provides 60% of the electricity in Ontario. Unfortunately, bureaucracy slows down construction without adding any safety. So I would take the politicians off the Nuclear Safety Commission and allow scientists to do the work so that we can add
Very
that
good.
source of energy to the portfolio.
This is the first time I've heard Mr. Poilievre say something pro-science.
Immigration. Next theme, immigration and foreign affairs.
There are lots of issues with immigration that are linked to Donald Trump. It's hard to immigrate these days. I'd like to stay if I can find a good job. We have to deal with people who are arriving in droves because people are arriving and they don't have work. Should we let them in or not? Why not? Why not welcome them if we have the capacity? Do you think we should let in anyone who wants to come? In the United States, there's one rule. In Canada, there's another. I think everyone should follow the rule. We know there are over 500,000 Haitians currently living in the United States who are now being threatened with deportation. They might lose their temporary protection. I'll show you the numbers here. This is the number of people crossing the border in Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle. 1,411 people in the first half of April. That's more than in March, February, or January. So you can see the numbers are growing. Simple question. You have 35 seconds each. Would you accept these Haitians into Canada or not? Mr. Carney.
Well, first of all, this is a question of humanity. This is a human issue. And these are some of the most vulnerable people in North America. But there are limits. We have to be human, but we have to be realistic. Canada cannot accept everyone. And we have an agreement with the Americans, the Safe Third Country Agreement. And under that agreement, we will send back most asylum seekers.
So they would be mostly sent back to the U.S. Mr. Blanchet.
The rules aren't tributary to the origin of the requester. We can't say we'll welcome the Haitians, but tough luck to the Venezuelans. The rules need to be the same for everyone. I'm particularly sensitive to this because I often meet with Haitian representatives. They are francophones, and so it's easier for them to integrate into Quebec. If Quebec is able financially to welcome them, then I'm sympathetic. But the rules have to be applied, and Quebec's welcoming capacity is at its very limit.
The formal rule now would be to send them back because they are in a safe third country, i.e. the U.S. Mr. Singh.
In general, we should do our part. It's a question of humanity and compassion. We appreciate the fact that our country is founded on immigration. That is something important to us. We want immigration levels that are in line with our needs. But yes, we need to take in people, but if we cannot accept people, well, we don't want them to have a bad life here in Canada and Quebec. So we need immigration, but we cannot take everyone.
Yes or no?
The specific question
The question is,
do we accept those people?
for the people crossing the border at La Colle, would they be welcome to Canada or not? Because we have the right to send them back under the Safe Third Country Agreement.
Unfortunately, they have to be returned because immigration has to follow the normal entry points. Quebecers are extremely generous and welcoming. They welcomed my wife, as Mr. Blanchet mentioned. But the Liberal government has abused Quebecers' generosity with an out-of-control immigration system. The population has grown 3 times faster than the number of new homes built. This has created a housing crisis in Quebec. They're at the breaking point. And the government of Quebec has been given the power to choose immigrants. That was under the Mulroney government that power was delegated to Quebec. So we need to have realistic numbers, realistic based on our housing capacity.
Here. What Mr. Poilievre is saying is that immigrants should be blamed for something that is really the fault of successive Conservative and Liberal governments who have not invested enough in our resources, who have not built enough housing, who have not welcomed people in the way that they should have been welcomed. This cannot be blamed on immigrants.
All right.
That's not true.
Quebec is now asking, given the number of asylum seekers in its territory, for $500 million. That was the amount they asked for in 2024. Mr. Poilievre, you'll be starting this open debate. Would you be sending a $500 million check to Quebec?
We have to work with the government of Quebec to fix the damage the Liberals caused with an out-of-control immigration system. And I also have to say that I reject the Century Initiative, which is a Liberal policy to balloon Canada's population to 100 million people. That's extreme. I think we should go back to immigration levels that are such that the population never grows faster than the number of houses, jobs, or healthcare services available.
Would you give more money to Quebec? And more generally, where would you like to have the immigration quota set?
Yes. We'll start with the second part. We need to have a cap on all types of immigration for a certain amount of time so that we can increase our capacity to welcome newcomers to Canada, including in housing, in training and language training here in Quebec, and make sure that the social safety net can accept them. And in those circumstances...
the targets announced by your predecessor, Mr. Trudeau, you would bring them down further, is that correct?
Well, there are some challenges here in Quebec, for example. Challenges with temporary foreign workers, for example. And it's a question of distribution, if I can say it that way. The distribution of workers across Quebec. And there's a shortage of workers. But we will maintain the cap on immigration for certainly a couple of years so that we can increase our ability to welcome newcomers.
Would you reduce the number of immigrants to Canada in general?
Instead of answering with a simple yes or no, I would want to base our response on the facts. It is obvious that we need immigration. When I speak to Quebec farmers, they tell me, yes, we need immigrants to work on our farms. When I talk to small and medium businesses, they tell me that we need immigrants. The question is, what level of immigration? We would base our immigration levels on the findings of an expert panel, which would study our capacities. Then we would have a data-based number. But I do not want to fall into the trap of fear-mongering or blaming immigrants for things. We need a facts-based, needs-based approach.
Temporary foreign workers are temporary. They're a different category. Foreign students are a separate category, and they are essential for our post-secondary establishments in Quebec and in Canada. Unfortunately, it's being used as a roundabout way to get asylum, and asylum is also taken advantage of through smuggling and organized crime. We don't want to import vulnerable workers because we simply need people. Asylum seekers should be people who are in distress that we need to welcome based on our welcoming capacity. We are not currently in Quebec able to welcome as many people that are arriving. Quebec needs to be able to establish what its targets are. And one clear element, the federal parliament, with a Bloc Québécois initiative, decided to force the federal government to consult provinces within 100 days to determine how many immigrants would be welcomed. No one can decide, apart from Quebec, how much Quebec can accept and welcome.
Another rare moment where I agree with Mr. Blanchet. Temporary foreign workers are often victims of power abuses. We would restrict the use of workers who are exploited by major corporations.
The Centre Initiative was 100 million immigrants in Canada before the end of the century. Dominic Barton, a parliamentary committee, said that they did not take into account the uniqueness of Quebec, and one of the two co-authors of the Centre Initiative and 100 million people is now one of Mr. Carney's close advisors.
Mr. Carney, on a different subject now, would you say that the immigration system in Canada is going off the rails, or has gone off the rails in the last 7 or 8 years?
Yes. The system isn't working. And especially after the pandemic. Our population has gone up, I think, at about 3% per year because of immigration. And that's why we need to have a cap for a certain period of time. And I'd like to say that Canadians, Quebecers, and all Canadians, they want to welcome immigrants. There's no problem with Canadians' attitudes here at all. It's the responsibility of all of us to increase our capacity to welcome newcomers.
Is it normal? Now, in France, it takes 6 months. In Germany, 8 months. So, why do asylum seekers coming to Canada take at least 3 years to be processed?
Because Canada is obstinate in welcoming more people than they can process, house, and they're not taking into account the proportionality of every province and territory.
I spoke with federal public servants, and they told me that there is a lack of resources. There aren't enough workers to manage all the files that are coming in. It's unthinkable that people have to wait 3 years for an answer.
But is that not the big problem?
It's a huge problem. So we need to have more people working on this. People who can make decisions, or at the very least provide an answer, because it is entirely unacceptable that we have people waiting so long.
Mr. Poilievre, is this problem solvable?
Yes. Look, it's all about efficiency. By screening out bogus asylum seekers, that's what's slowing things down. We could reduce processing times by getting rid of the bogus claimants. And when people are forum shopping, when they've been to other places, that also slows things down and discourages genuine claimants. My point of view is that if someone's in danger in their country of origin, they should be able to decide to come to Canada. But if they're not refugees, for example, we've seen a situation in Mexico where people came here without ever needing to be refugees. They never needed asylum, and that causes a bottleneck in the system. And so what we're going to do is ensure that genuine refugees can come here and have their lives saved through the generosity of Canadians.
But how do you separate the real ones from the non-real ones?
Well, that's the problem. The machine, the apparatus is too cumbersome. And Mexico was one of the causes in the problem. So by eliminating that
Mr. Carney,
source, that
3
helps
years. Is
alleviate
that an
the
acceptable
problem.
wait time in Canada?
No, it's not acceptable. It's inhumane. It's inhumane for asylum seekers. And that's an indication that there is a problem with productivity in that department. That takes resources, but it's also a question of productivity.
Why not hitting the brake pedal with kindness, of course? Why not slow things down until we have a good system and a good public service for immigration that can deal with files in a few months? The rhythm is far too quick, and so we can't succeed at this rate. People, for economic reasons or who are in distress for other reasons, come to Canada and they're lost because their files aren't being processed.
You can conclude, Mr. Carney.
I more or less agree with that, but we need to be, as you've said, we need to be neutral. We need to act in a neutral and fair way.
All right.
A fair way for all.
I want to save some time to talk about two other important files, international aid, Ukraine, and Gaza. I think we've understood your position on immigration. The question is simple. Should we cut international aid or not? I'll give you some figures here. $2.1 billion is being given to Ukraine currently. That's a large amount of money for Canada. Ethiopia also. Haiti. There's a long list of other countries that we could have put up on the board. Mr. Poilievre, you've said that we need to cut international aid. What would you cut? Ukraine, Ethiopia, Haiti?
No. I would start by cutting off China. The Liberal government gave $250 million to the Chinese Infrastructure Bank in order to build pipelines, highways, and other infrastructure to promote the expansion of Beijing's empire. I don't think that's a good use of taxpayer money. Also, we saw UNRWA, the organization in the Gaza Strip that took part, or whose employees took part in the attacks of September 7th. So I don't think we should be funding that type of activity either. The aid we give should be directly to people in need and not through bureaucracies, multinational bureaucracies and terrorists.
Let's talk about Gaza. Currently, Doctors Without Borders, just today, said that the situation was worse than ever. So if you cut UNRWA, which might be an imperfect organization, but if you cut aid to them, how can Canada help Palestinians?
With not-for-profit groups, NGOs that will deliver the services directly to Gazans.
The only group
on the ground.
I'd like to
because it's a waste of money. When that money that's not even getting to the people.
I will start by saying if there's anyone in an organization with a problem, then yes, that should be investigated. But what you said about UNRWA was disgusting. This is the only organization that is helping out people on the ground. And you painted the entire organization with the same brush, calling it a terrorist organization. That is unacceptable. That is hateful, and it is entirely inappropriate.
Mr. Carney, on this subject of Palestinians and international aid, would you continue to fund UNRWA?
Yes. We are in a situation where we need to have an immediate ceasefire. We need to have all the hostages returned, and we need to resume humanitarian aid to Gaza. And at this time, we have $100 million from the Government of Canada that is ready to be provided in humanitarian aid to Gaza with organizations that are working there. And that's key. And I agree with Mr. Singh. There are only a couple of groups that are working in Gaza right now.
Mr. Blanchet?
It's a very unique situation. In Canada and in Quebec, the Jewish community is victims of radical Islamists. Palestinians are currently victims of terrible violence from the Israeli regime. We have to help people in distress. There and elsewhere, it's the best way to have international aid that is not military. We need to allow people to live happily where they live. And Palestine will not become Mar-a-Lago for Americans that just want to chill on the coast. We have to see where the money goes. We have to see how much money is taken by Hamas. It's maybe less now, but it was huge in the past. A lot of money was taken from the Palestinians. We have to help Palestinians at the end of the day.
International aid. So the three of you on this side would continue. Mr. Poilievre, do you have an amount in your mind of how much you would cut in international aid?
We're going to target waste. In all programs, we will audit to identify examples like UNRWA when they used funds for Hamas. We're also going to find other examples of international waste because...
Sorry.
No. The decision is to protect Canadian taxpayers. We all agree that there's a lot of suffering here in Canada, and Canadians can't afford to pay their bills. So we need to find some savings in order to reduce the cost of living here in Canada.
Mr. Roy, I would like to come back to...
And we need to look at all departments in order to find those savings and protect affordability
no amount
in Canada.
The question of Gaza.
Mr. Singh, I'm sorry, everyone's had their piece to say.
The situation is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see innocent people being killed. Mr. Carney, why don't you call things as they are? This is a genocide. People in Israel do deserve peace and security, but people in Palestine do as well. What is going on right now is a genocide against people
Mr.
in
Carney,
Palestine.
you can conclude.
Why won't you admit it?
The situation in Gaza, in the Middle East, is horrible. But
It's a genocide.
But I never use that word in a political way to politicize the situation.
All right.
But it's a matter of facts.
That was Mr. Carney's response. I think we've understood your question, Mr. Singh. Now, we'll be moving on to the next theme, identity and sovereignty.
It would be good to put flags out on our balconies to show our Canadian pride. I was surprised to see how proud people were. We're Canadian. We will not be Americans. I think we're going to be more united. I think I haven't seen this in a long time. So, yes, we've all seen this across Canada. All commentators have seen this. There is a wave of patriotism in Canada, but we've also seen deep divisions. In the West, Alberta says it may separate. We've given 6 months to the next Prime Minister to meet its requests. Otherwise, there could be a crisis of national unity that is unprecedented. In Quebec, the Parti Québécois is nearing power and is promising a referendum during your term, possibly. At the end of the day, are we not as divided or as the U.S. or very divided? We'll go around the table. Mr. Poilievre first.
Unfortunately, yes, there are divisions all across Canada, all kinds of divisions. And I think that we've had a federal government that has divided everyone, pitting regions against one another and various groups against one another. Social classes pitted against one another. We need to unite Canadians. We need to unite around our common identity. That includes the French language, our English language, our military, the promise of Canada that anyone who works hard can have a great life in a beautiful house on a safe street.
Thank you. Mr. Singh? Is there not division in Canada?
When I travel throughout the country, I observe great unity, great solidarity. Canadians want to defend our country. They do not want to become the 51st state. They want to protect what is dear to our hearts. When I talk to people about identity, people tell me our identity is taking care of one another. We have programs for that. For example, our healthcare system. We need to protect these systems and strengthen them, not cut them or sacrifice them. Now is the time to bring people together.
Thank you.
To get things done with our solidarity.
Thank you. Mr. Blanchet.
I think that people confuse certain things. Some people think that all Canadians should follow one single line behind the federal government, and so we only have one economy. Mr. Trump's fear, or rather the threat of Mr. Trump has to be taken seriously, but instrumentalizing it for nation building in Canada, where Quebecers are being asked to be attached to their language as a frivolity, I can't agree with that.
Thank you. We'll go back.
Quebec's uniqueness is also economic, and we have to be on the same level
Is there
playing
a
field.
division in Canada?
Well, there's always a risk, but I think that right now, Canadians are uniting, and they want to unite. Canadians want a positive agenda. There is solidarity here. Healthcare is a right here in Canada. It's not a big business like in the United States. We put a value on diversity here. And we also put importance on judicial independence. And, you know, the potential of Canada is enormous because we're all in this together.
Thank you. So open debate. Mr. Blanchet, how can we think that Quebec, if it's on its own and independent, could be stronger to stand up to Trump and in comparison with all of Canada right now?
Does Canada need to be a province of Mexico to be allied to Mexico against the States? We're not in that debate this week, but Quebec does not need to be a Canadian province to talk of its own voice. Our economy is doing fairly well, but our economy is different to that of Canada's, and the announcements that have been made have helped Ontario Steel, Ontario Banking, the Ontario automotive industry to fund
aluminum.
Western oil. That is what those were the investments made. The counter-tariffs on aluminium are very harmful because people have to pay for the aluminium they sent to be processed in the States that is then re-imported into Canada. $2 billion to the States in countervailing tariffs. For that, nothing happened. But now, $2 billion has simply been signed by Mr. Carney for the automotive industry. He sees himself as a negotiator, but he hasn't even been re-elected yet. Should Quebecers not make sure that they have a strong voice that collaborates? I've already said that we would work with Canada, but I've asked to speak to Mr. Carney, but he's never called me. He's never wanted to talk to me. I want Quebec to be at the negotiating table for a stronger negotiating position with Canada.
Is there also not a risk, like was the case with the automotive industry in Ontario, to this? Because this could happen to the detriment of saving other industries in our country. If we put all our eggs in the automotive basket.
No, not at all. For example, our counter tariffs for the aluminum sector and steel, no, they're not bad. They're not bad at all.
We import aluminium cans from the States that comes from our
that's
mined
not
aluminium
right at all. If I may, the counter tariffs for the aluminum sector are $30 billion. The counter tariffs, or $30 billion rather, the counter tariffs for the automotive sector, that's $8 billion. That's a huge difference because, you know, there are a number of reasons for this, but our counter tariffs, it's not just for Quebec, it's for the workers there, are much higher.
I don't know where that money came from, and I don't know when the industry will get that money.
We are using the counter tariffs.
What was it, $2 billion for automotive? Immediately for them, because we're shaking in our boots when the automotive industry is at risk. But aluminium was not supported. There's no processing capacity. There's no help for temporary work losses. $2 billion for the automotive industry, but nothing for aluminium. When it's Ontario, the checks come flying. But it has to be the same for other places,
right,
especially Quebec.
That's the numbers. Your numbers are wrong.
Mr. Poiliev.
Yeah, but he's got a point when he says that the weakness in our country right now threatens our unity. Your Liberal government for 10 years has the worst track record on immigration, on housing, on inflation, on crime. But doesn't it embarrass you to ask Canadians for a fourth term of office after the worst Liberal record?
I've just become leader. And
same members of Parliament, it's the same old promises.
Leader. And I've been Prime Minister for 1 month. And in that month, we have an agreement with the provinces. We have an agreement with Australia. We have an agreement with France. We have an agreement with the United Kingdom. We have set up negotiations for the next Prime Minister, and that's a decision that people at home are going to make. And we've done all of that in this short time. And we've also cut the tax. We've put in place programs for workers who are most affected by this tariff war, and all that in 1 month.
Okay.
Quebec sent a letter with 5 requests. No one responded to it. We made requests, but we keep hearing, oh, we've spoken to provinces, things are great with Quebec, but we didn't get any response to our letter. Is it because of the final straight of the election campaign? What's going on?
Mr. Carney, you described healthcare as a right, and I agree with that. But you are talking about massive cuts to healthcare. You admitted it.
Mr. Singh, I let you speak earlier.
The long-time Liberal government House Leader, Karina Gold, agreed that there would be
Mr. Singh, cut his mic. I let you speak more earlier, but now we're nearing the end. We're talking about Quebec and French. Does Quebec have the right to defend French, even at the cost of using the notwithstanding clause upstream? Mr. Poiliev.
Yes. Quebec must defend French. It's the common language of Quebec, and I will defend French. My father was a francophone from Saskatchewan. I lost my French a little bit when I was a teenager, but I married a Quebecer. Our children speak French, and I understand why French needs to be protected, and that is why I will continue to support laws and policies that allow Quebec and the federal government to protect French all across Canada.
Using the notwithstanding clause to protect something, you're against that, Mr. Carney?
Well, there is a general question here around the use of the notwithstanding clause in a preventative way. And it's not necessarily a question just for Quebec. It's been used in Quebec, but it could also apply in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. And it has. And so the question is, do we have rights and freedoms here in Canada? Are we equal? And we need to consider the right balance. Certainly. But the use of the notwithstanding clause in a preventative way, that's a question for the Supreme Court.
Mr. Blanchet, in terms of the use of the notwithstanding clause, obviously you have no problem with that.
Jean Chrétien, on behalf of Pierre Trudeau, negotiated with the provinces, and it led to the notwithstanding clause, and this wasn't signed on by Quebec. It was tested. It's not the type of use that is in question, it's how it is used. The Supreme Court has already decided. Mr. Carney wants to turn to the Supreme Court to disagree with itself in the decision it made with Quebec.
There are
It's all funded with Quebec money.
Interveners from Quebec who have challenged this to the Supreme Court.
You are going to take Quebec taxpayer money to contest a Quebec bill that is under Quebec jurisdiction. That was adopted by the National Assembly of Quebec.
Mr. Singh, on this notwithstanding clause for French.
I believe in protecting the French language. During this debate, I have tried to bring up health a few times. Mr. Roy cut me off a number of times. Look at my time on the clock. Every time I tried to bring up health care, I was responding directly to something that Mr. Carney said, because health is something that is important for me. It is about identity. It's something I am very passionate about, and every time I tried to bring it up, Mr. Roy called me out and cut me off. That is not fair. For me, the question of healthcare is crucial. When I talk to people on the street and ask them what is important to them, they say universal public health care. People ought to know that the other leaders on this stage tonight would cut healthcare funding. And I think that's wrong.
No.
Not now, Mr. Blanchet.
No, neither
The two
Mr.
major leaders
Blanchet
have
nor
both
I have said
this,
that.
and I need to tell people because it's important. This is what I believe in. This is what I believe in and what the NDP believes in.
That's not right to make allegations
Okay,
like that.
we talked about health earlier. I let you speak, but now we're moving on to another topic.
Yes, but now we need to bring it up in the context of
Okay.
identity. What is Canadian identity? Healthcare. We have to bring it up in this part of the debate. Canadian identity is about taking care of one another. We need our universal public healthcare system. It should be strengthened. It should be protected. We are in the midst of a healthcare crisis. It's supposed to be an open debate, so we should be able to talk about whatever topic comes up.
There isn't a lot of risk when it comes to the health of a language in
Let's
Quebec.
talk about language.
There's
Outside
healthcare
of
issues in Quebec as well, and I am here to protect the healthcare system for everyone, including Quebecers.
Outside of Quebec, Mr. Singh and others, the weighting of francophones has gone from 6% in 71 to 3.5% in 2021. How will you reverse this trend? People are listening to you across Canada.
Well, first of all, we are going to increase the level of Francophone immigrants outside of Quebec. We'll increase that from 10 to 12%. Second, we will strengthen Radio-Canada and CBC with new governance structure and new money. Mr. Poilievre wants to cut that. We are going to strengthen the telefilm industry and the Canadian Council for the Arts so that we can increase training.
All right, Mr. Poilievre.
First of all, the Conservative Party supported the federal legislation to ensure that federally regulated workplaces in Quebec follow Bill 101. We also will increase funding to allow young people to take part in French immersion for Anglophones coming from outside Quebec, and that will enrich the French language. And third, we'll make sure Quebec has more control over immigrant selection so that they can better choose those who can be franchised and integrated into the labor market and Quebec culture. That's what we want to do to protect the French language.
Mr. Poilievre, of course, your position on Radio-Canada and the CBC has created a lot of concerns. You've continued to say that you would protect Radio-Canada because it provides a service to Francophone minorities across the country, but you would abolish the CBC. How is such a thing possible?
Well, it is possible. We have news networks.
But they share the same buildings. You understand how difficult it would be.
I do understand the situation. I will protect Radio-Canada's services because there's already other French language news services. TVA is an example. So it is possible to have news service that's focused on French news services, and the CBC can just operate with its own revenues as an NGO,
And what would the timeline
as a
be?
non-governmental organization. The principle is that the government should simply do what the market cannot do, and the market would never be able to provide exclusive French services to Francophones all across Canada. So there is a role for the government to play in defending French news services. When I was a young person in Calgary, that was the only way for me to get news in French. So I would protect those services because there's a good reason to do that.
Let me translate that. Mr. Poilievre wants to get rid of Radio-Canada and CBC. And then he would write a check to other companies so that they can provide French language services. That's the wrong thing to do. We would protect Radio-Canada and CBC, especially in the context of a misinformation which is undermining our democracy. I am not a francophone, but I am a francophile. I love the French language. I have fallen in love with it. It enriches our country. Having Quebec benefits all of Canada. The forward-thinking ideas that have come out of Quebec, we need Quebec. We need the French language, and we will protect them.
For the first time since 2011, there are no women here as leaders. I met with a young woman. This is a very short clip. I met with her earlier this week. Do you have a question for the leaders, something you're concerned about? In Canada, the status of women. Yeah, the status of women. You're worried about things moving backward? Yes, that there could be a rollback of women's rights by some parties. That concerns me. My question, would you commit to making sure that there are no women's rights that are rolled back? And, for example, would you push for having free contraception, as is already the case in some provinces? Is that something that you would commit to, starting with Mr. Poilievre?
We will not eliminate that. We will protect women's rights. I have a message for Canadian women who are watching. We will not pass legislation that would restrict the right to abortion. That's been our policy for 20 years, and it won't change. That's a guarantee that I make to you. We will, in fact, broaden women's rights by dealing with crime against women. Women are often victims of assaulters who are released because of liberal legislation. They're released repeatedly, and that allows serious criminals to repeat offend against women. And we are going to lock those people up. We're going to lock those men up to protect women against violence.
Of course, our party believes in women's rights. We would never allow for any backsliding on that front. You brought up pharmacare. Well, it was the NDP that forced the Liberal government to bring in pharmacare. It covers now diabetes medication, but also contraceptives, and we believe that is crucial. Rights are important, but being able to access the rights is also important. We are also the only party running a candidate slate that is half women. The other parties have seen backsliding on their candidate slates in terms of diverse people and women. But for us, it's an important issue. Our candidate slate must represent the Canadian public, and that means it should be half women. For us, we will always defend women's rights and also access
Thank you, Mr.
to those rights.
There is no member of the Bloc Québécois that will be able to table a bill or motions that are against abortion. Preventive Maid will also not be allowed. With American influence, we are in a very difficult place for women. There are many ways that invite women to participate in politics. We have reached parity with the Bloc Québécois. We wanted it to be 50-50, but in our current political culture, and I have many great women in my party, it's much more difficult at the federal level than in Quebec.
Yes, I think that this an aspect of politics right now, the negative politics that we're seeing, it's becoming more and more difficult to recruit women as candidates, and really any candidate. But absolutely, we defend the rights of women. all the time. But what I'm concerned about is the use of the notwithstanding clause. Not in a preventative way, but after Supreme Court judgments have been made. What does that do? It takes away Canadians' rights and freedoms. And it creates, and Mr. Poilievre has proposed this I know the situation, but this is a very dangerous development, because if we start with that, abortion could be,
Give the right to reply.
the right to abortion could eventually be next.
Mr. Poilievre, you can answer.
Mr. Carney, I said in a case where a man kills 6 people in a premeditated way and the court released that person, that means he served 4 years for each life he took. The criminal in that case will be free in 50 years. You're talking about danger. That's what's dangerous. Liberal laws that allow criminals to circulate on our streets. I will never excuse for locking murderers up.
No, I'm sorry, but you're trying to change the Canadian Constitution.
All right, gentlemen.
That's what you've proposed.
I would use Section 33 to put an end to the crime that Liberals caused with their policies.
Where will you stop?
By stopping murderers, yes.
Everyone knows that there should be severe penalties for murder. You're trying to sow division here. Everyone agrees on that front. If someone kills someone, there needs to be a strong punishment. You're not special for proposing that.
No, the other 3
Everyone
parties...
agrees.
All right, Mr. Blanchet. Very quickly, please.
Mr. Carney said that I voted for the new Official Languages Act bill. The money comes from the previous bill, and the official language minority community money comes from the bill. I was asked to bring changes. We brought the changes. We voted for, but we didn't want it to apply to Quebec because it harms Quebec.
Gentlemen, you know, things didn't turn out perfectly, but Mr. Singh, you say you got 22 minutes compared to 24, 25. Roughly equitable. I'm sorry that I did have to cut off your mic, but I'd like to wish all 4 of you good luck with the rest of the campaign, and I hope that we'll see your costed plans as soon as possible so that we can see how much all of your promises will cost. And I hope that everyone listening tonight will be able to make an informed decision now. Voting starts this weekend.
And the game.
And the match? I don't know. There's still a couple periods left. All right, thank you so much for being with us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes this debate. See you next time. Good night.